your house starts looking spotted. That's because the paint, if it's done right, it doesn't just decide to fall off your house. It wears away like the sole of a tennis shoe. And there's an application process to paint. So last time your house was painted, they painted up to this portion, and then they came back and they painted the next section, and they overlapped it. So you get these areas that look more solid than others.
Ohio Painting Company podcast back again with the founders of the Ohio Painting Company, Kevin Silliman and Nick Goebel. And, you know, with the amount of episodes that we already have in the rearview mirror, we're finally starting to get into, I mean, first off, how about the 10,000 square foot warehouse that we're in? We filmed here last week, and it was awesome. We wanted to do it again this week. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah,
how are you guys?
Absolutely. Good.
Good.
Awesome stuff. You know, with the questions, if you go back to episode 4 and you remember, we had some folks join us on, I can't remember their names.
One was Randy.
Randy, I remember Randy. And now the other two are escaping me.
Did I black out? I don't remember that.
Randy was the dude
Oh,
that
the
called in
call-in?
about his deck,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, Randy, and then Gary called in also.
Yeah, Randy wasn't
And
proud
then,
of his dad.
and then
Nicole,
Nicole
called in
Yeah,
also.
solid questions. I have a couple of more that we wanted to kind of get out. Common questions that you may ask yourself, and as soon as you walk upstairs or take the kids to practice or whatever it is, you just forget that you even had the thought, you know, because it's not exactly a big part of your life, so it just kind of fizzles away.
Until it becomes the focus, and then that's all you can think about.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, one of them being the classic eggshell, and you know, what's the other? You know, what is eggshell first off, but what is it compared to that it sometimes
like
gets
a satin or something.
confused
What's the
with?
difference? Yeah, because they're all close.
They're so close. I mean, it's so nuanced, and you know, from a traditional standpoint, you know, satin and eggshell probably the most two confusing. I think everybody knows what semi-gloss and gloss is.
Okay, now first off, which one is a more common use? Do you think?
Well, it depends, really, because a lot of people use satin, say the word satin, and a lot of people say eggshell, but most people think that eggshell is a color.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
But it's a finish without a doubt.
It is.
Unless you're living in paint, yeah, it's all noise. A lot of it is, so depending on the architecture, what you're doing, what you want to highlight, you choose different finishes and different paints, and satin is not satin. I mean, if you're talking about Valspar versus Sherwin-Williams versus PPG or Ben Moore, eggshell's not eggshell. It's all variants, and really they're a gray area. I mean, there's a traditional scale where eggshell, you think of the shine on an eggshell is lower in shine than the satin. So traditionally speaking, eggshell has less shine than a satin finish does. However, it's all based on angular light and then straight on light also, and so it's always a balance of these degrees and the amount of light reflection and sheen value that you get from dead on versus at an angle, whether it's a 40-degree angle or a 60-degree angle. Basically looking down the edge of a wall from an angle. How much shine are you seeing? So manufacturers use similar sheens or specifications to adjust for that, but it's funny enough, so a lot of times you'll find that eggshell finishes seem shinier than a satin finish. And it depends. Even Sherwin-Williams, they've got products that seem to contradict themselves on the same, you know, on the same gradient or measurement level. So, are they the same? Well, flat's not the same. Semi-gloss isn't the same. Use flat to make walls look great. There's a lot of high-dollar flats out there now that are durable. I don't think they're like toddler durable or commercial, you know, hallway durable, but they are durable in a residential setting. More durable than they have been traditionally. Eggshell, you know, steps up the hardness of the finish and adds a little more wipeability. So those are your wall finishes: flat, eggshell, satin, and then the trim you get into either satin, semi-gloss. So you're looking for contrast in the sheen on trim versus a wall. And then there's a lot of designer aspects that they'll use gloss or semi-gloss. Semi-gloss is a common trim finish and door finish, and these are mostly interior finishes. Nobody really cares until they do. And a lot of times it's up to us. I mean, how many conversations do we have about you know, what is your lifestyle like? You know, are your kids leaving the house? No, I see they're 3 and they're playing with food right now as we're having this, you know, this meeting, looking at your house. So yeah, you want, you know, something that's eggshell or satin and a, you know, high dollar like an emerald or a Benjamin Moore Aura finish. So you have all these conversations. So that's why it's good to call people like us, because we can, if you're going to pay to have it done, get it done right with the right finishes, and don't cry over the marginal extra costs with upgrading your paint. But so, touch up though, that's the next one.
Yeah, so that is a different question. You know, the touch up for sure. Which one's going to be the most, you know, comparable? I mean, as far as looks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the I'm gonna, well, obviously you can see that, you know, the information is just, you could puke it out. There's just so much. But I think bringing it back down to just the basics is where Nick was just leading. If you've got kids, you probably want to have at least an eggshell. We're going to talk you into what looks the best, because when we walk out the doors, we want it to look phenomenal, knowing that that new car you just bought is going to have some, down the road, it's going to get some wear and tear. You're going to find french fries underneath the seat, you know, that have been there a long time, just like you're going to get marks on your walls, you know, that have been there. So, you know, desirably, the flat finishes are most definitely the most desirable, because they don't reflect any light to where you see indifferentiation, well, boogers or just bad junk. Yeah, bad drywall mainly is the biggest issue. I was really trying to get nail pops out of there and bad seams, but sheens highlight those things, you know, and then you start looking at the structure of your house and you're wondering, you know, has this thing even been built right? But yeah, so a flat paint is really probably the best. And then if we're going with durability, we'll throw some eggshell in there. That's what we'll talk them into next.
Right.
But we definitely stay away from the sheens, you know, the upper portions of those. To the tune of even most, not all, but most trims are going to a satin just to keep that sheen down, and it looks really sweet.
Yeah. I think one of the questions I had coming off of that, and this is something we didn't really discuss prior to the episode starting, but it was more of the paint flashing, which I learned about with you not too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago. But
welcome to the paint world.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I know what DTM means. I know what paint flashing is. So, what sheen? Or let me ask it this way: can you get paint flashing with any sheen?
Some designer flats, yes, because they do have slight angular sheen to it. Beyond that, yeah, it is all about prep and application.
Prep, most importantly.
You know, a common question, you know, and I think it might be one that inspired kind of us going down this trail in the first place is will eggshell touch up satin? Will satin touch up eggshell? And the truth is that it is really difficult to touch it up to the point where we encourage our customers to hunt through their piles of paint in the basement and look for the paint that they originally painted. Because if you're going to try to touch up an eggshell or satin finish wall, you can't just go out and buy touch-up. This is not going to happen. Too many differences in technology and variance in the measurement equipment to measure out the pigments that go in. Like, they have it to a science, but there's still human error and technology error, and time. You know, just sitting in if you can find the original paint, use that to attempt touch-up, and there are several ways. You can go back into our back catalog videos to find out how to best approach touching up a wall, but with eggshell, it's never going to be perfect. From dead on, a lot of angles it might look perfect, but you might be sitting there on your couch, like, you know, way off in the distance, and be looking at your kitchen wall as the sun's coming through it and it's hitting, and you just see the big old square where you did your touch up. So ultimately, the way we train our guys, the way we approach it is, if you're into any type of sheen on the wall and you're trying to touch it up, you're going to treat that patch or that area 3 times. Once after the patch is done, once with primer, 2 finish coats, and then you're going to paint that whole wall from corner to corner, get into those natural shadows, and that's what's going to touch up your wall, which is not touch up. I understand that, but like, if that's what you're expecting, you'll go through that length.
Final thing I want to ask about before we move on to the second part is the big box guys, the big box stores. are they? I mean, I don't want to put them down because you guys are, you do what you do. You don't consider yourself big box. You're not the Lowe's of the Home Depot.
We buy plenty from them, and not in the way
Right.
of paint, though.
But the question I had was more along the lines of, do you think they want you to kind of mess it up a little bit so you're coming back and trying to fix it more?
Isn't
I
that
think-
the modern
Or
era?
is the product
here's what I think.
Is the product designed? I keep thinking back to your face when I held up that gallon of paint a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Those products for DIYers.
Yeah, so, exclusivity. If you go to, I'm just going to throw electric out there.
Okay.
If you go out to an electric store that's just very specific, that's all they do. They're going to carry might be the same name, a totally different kind of wire, that they're going to try to sell you rather than a box store. Us, we've got a crew that can go in and do a little new construction, or an exterior, but we would never take them, if you can follow this, and put them inside on the detail of a level 5 finished drywall job that's supposed to be immaculate. You know what I mean? So those different things, there are differences without a doubt. Yeah, it's hard not to call them out, and make a scene about it, especially whenever we're trying to run a podcast.
Right,
and they might even actually be sponsoring us at this time. Who knows? But you just, yeah. Anything wrong with the paint? You can use whatever paint you want. You really can. It's just a matter of, do you want it to lay down really nice? You want it to be smooth, baby butt smooth, like we say that we're going to do. You want it to lay down like butter. Do you want to have brush strokes? Do you want to have roller marks? So the qualities of paints that you can find in a specific store like a Sherwin-Williams or a PPG, I'm not going to say you're not going to find it in a box store, but I will say that I'm not going to say.
All right, I understand. It's not a problem at all.
Because I'm sure Valspar and all the other ones, I'm sure they have their paints that will do that job, but you got to know how to work them. Every paint is different, so you got to be able to move that around. Yeah.
Of course. Well, I say we move on to the second part here and talk a little bit about when should you paint, and should you start small or should you just get it all done at once? What should people be looking for when they're about to make that decision? What is it? Are we talking exterior? Are we talking interior? It's just so unpredictable here in the state of Ohio to know what's coming around the corner weather-wise. Mm-hmm. So, either of you can take off with that wherever you want to go.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll take inside, and he can take outside.
Perfect.
All right? Go ahead.
It's wintertime. It's best to be proactive with anything, really. Here's the thing with paint companies. Us or CertaPro or Herbie Hancock painting, it doesn't matter who. Nobody's painting outside right now, and the industry is very customer focused to the point where and competitive. We're not going to charge you to come out and give you an estimate. So the time to consider painting doesn't cost you anything. Sometimes people like to live in oblivion and just pretend that issues aren't there. But if you recognize you got to have a plan, give us a call, because now is the time for spring. Because once we're booking for spring, and typically we're going to run about 8 weeks deep going into spring, and scheduling builds from there. And so if you want your house painted within the year, winter's a good time to start considering that and sourcing who you might want to use for the project. Paint
How about somebody that has a budget and they only want to paint part of their house? What would you say?
Yeah, so we come out and there is efficiency, cost efficiency in painting everything, which ultimately is a great maintenance plan. Is get everything taken care of at once so you can focus on something else on your list, because your list it seems like your plate never gets smaller, right? It just grows and grows. So we're happy to give you a price on everything. But when you start seeing cracks at the joints where your trim meets your siding on your house, when you start to see paint lifting, or you start seeing the grain of the wood and the paint's kind of cracking out, and anywhere that you can visibly see where, oh, that's a gap where water or mist or whatever might get in and set. And then, it's not the spring, summer, fall you're worried about. It's the winter. And that water getting in there and saturating, and now it freezes. What does ice do in the ice cube tray? It expands. So you pour it halfway full, and then your ice cream or your ice cube tray is yeah, I like ice cream too. So yeah, Freudian slip. Water expands. So can water get in there? Can it stay? And when it freezes and expands, is it going to destroy the wood? So if you're thinking like that, you can assess the areas on your house and determine whether they need paint or not. So that's a simple one when it comes to wood. Other times too, if you have an unevenness of your finish, if you go into, one year your house looks great and nice and even, it might not look perfect, but it looks like relatively uniform all the way across the siding. And you come back after the winter and you start seeing like we call them roller marks, overlap marks, but like your house starts looking spotted. That's because the paint, if it's done right, it doesn't just decide to fall off your house. It wears away like the sole of a tennis shoe. And there's an application process to paint. So last time your house was painted, they painted up to this portion, and then they came back and they painted the next section and they overlapped it. So you get these areas that look more solid than others. And if your house starts looking ununiform, then that's another time to paint, because not only does it look bad, but the protection on that surface is starting to get thin also. Too thin for, to protect it from any type of water infiltration or anything like that. So those are two common ones outside.
I'm wondering, real quick before we jump to the inside and talk about interior, let's take a look at the outside of a house. Obviously, it's going to depend on size of the house and weather. Mm-hmm. But start to finish on an exterior project, let's say a whole house. And I've done videos with you guys start to finish on houses. But what kind of timeline are we looking at there? Let's say weather's perfect. Mm-hmm. Standard size house,
Standard size house, 3,500 square foot, maybe 2 stories. You're looking at about a week and a half.
Really?
Yeah. If it's a historical house, requires lead containment, scraping, all that stuff. It might double the time. That's a rather extensive process to remove that, protect everybody, the squirrels, everybody, and then put, slather it up in oil to basically encapsulate everything. So rarely does a residential home go past, 3 working weeks.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that answers the question perfectly. To go away from what Nick was saying about exterior projects, Kev, let's go inside and talk a little bit more. I mean, obviously paint can last longer on the inside. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right on, yeah.
It's not exposed to near as many elements, but you got traffic, you got kids, you got dogs. So talk me through that.
So, whenever I go into a house, I just, overall, you ask, what at the beginning, what would you like to have done, ceiling, walls, or trim? And most generally, it's walls. And I think that if it's in the budget, I would always say to paint the trim, because you're going to have the walls done and they're going to look great, and everything in your house is beautiful, and you've got, where the sweeper hit the trim, or the dog was chewing on the corner, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
The entry door has, there's just a number of things that could, literally go wrong with kids. But indentations, corners, they get hit. They get hit a lot with foot traffic, the trim does. And doors get handled a lot. That's why, they keep you closed, but you got to touch one to get in it,
Right.
So there's a lot of things that you can, that you can do in your house to keep away from having to paint your trim all the time. But and one of them is clean it, a lot, your trim.
Sure.
But we really don't do that a lot anymore. I mean, nobody really goes around and cleans their baseboard. I have to say, my house is so small, I don't have a choice. It's going to look like crap if I don't. So the whole purpose of painting is to make it look good. And I'm sure this is going to sound really good for the audio or next.
We'll get it figured out.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is keep your baseboards and door jambs clean, and they'll last a lot longer.
Right.
So
got it. Well, with both of those on the exterior and the interior, when and how much does the budget allow? I think we do have time for one more question, and it was in regards to metal. And I've seen metal roofs. Mm-hmm. You guys have probably seen it all. But you mentioned before we came on metal houses.
Yeah.
Did you mean a metal house? Houses made of metal?
Aluminum siding, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was, it was a hot seller in '70s and '80s, and
Now, can you tell it's metal?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you should, and it looks good to, I mean, again, flat finishes are great because they don't show any imperfections, especially like what Nick was talking about, how they overlap when you have lap marks. Then the UV rays, they beat that up, and then you can still see that lap. Well, that's because you have so many more mils of paint. When you overlap, you have twice as many now because you've hit that overlap. You've hit it 4 times if you're doing 2 coats. Needless to say, that flat will take that flashing, because that's what that's called whenever it starts to fade, will take that away. You won't see it. You will see it with the satin paint though. But on metal buildings, metals are typically shiny. I mean, the finishes are. So you think of metal of at least having, an eggshell or a satin finish on them. So, a lot of metal buildings, they go to again, the sheen, what you want to do. But again, what we like to do is put a flat finish on that metal and then put a sheen on the trim and make that kind of make it stand out that way. But there's some ins and outs of that, and pros and cons too. So
yeah.
didn't mean to take that away from you.
No, it's okay. We paint metal houses all the time. People ask us that all the time, and you can paint everything. I mean, when metal housing or metal siding was sold, it was sold as a bulletproof method, 0 maintenance, and it really kind of is, as long as it makes the water travel from the roof to the ground without infiltration. It's a solid product, but weather's going to get everything. So the coatings that they put on them back on, all the way up to those are going to wear away again, like the sole of a shoe, or they'll fade out, or the colors will get outdated. So metal can be painted. You just have to have the appropriate temperatures, and you have to remove oxidation. So if you got a metal house and you go and you wipe your hand on it, you get a bunch of chalk on your hand. That's oxidation. That's just the siding finish breaking down. And so we clean that off with a TSB type solution, pressure washing, and get the majority of that off. And then you use specialized products as well when you go to paint that house. That's going to, because you can't remove it all. We're not working in a science lab. Not every bit of it can be removed cost effectively. You remove the most, which is going to cause some type of we call it contamination or protection or barrier. What's that? Bonding. Yeah, basically something that's going to break the bond, like some type of substrate between the coating and the metal. So you remove the majority of it, and then some of the specialized products will re-emulsify or penetrate through what's remaining there, latch on your metal, not promote any type of rusting or corrosion, and ultimately, speaking exactly to what Kevin said, is metal is so smooth, if you don't paint it right with the right finish, you're going to see every nick, ding, scratch, and that happens with metal. Take your pop can, if you're getting bored with your pop can, you're going to put a dent in. They dent easily. Oh, yeah. So if you go with a bad finish or a too shiny finish, you're going to see all of those things. But if it's done right, your house will look brand new, and it'll last it'll last another 15, 20 years. Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah.
I am wondering about the start of the Ohio Painting Company, and before you had all this equipment and the knowledge that you have now in 2024. Were people turned away when they would say, "Hey, come and do X, Y, and Z," but you could only do X because of the equipment that was available to you? Did you ever run into any of that stuff early on?
I think it was more just knowledge. Anything can be painted as long as the adhesion is good with the paint that you're using. And the substrate is clean. So I'm going to go with an example, kind of like where you were alluding to, like nobody, and from baby boomers, older than myself, I'm like the last of the baby boomers, but they all think that the biggest challenge, with painters is they want to paint your gutters and they're going to peel. Well, they don't peel anymore. We can paint gutters today. Where again, just a lot of people just think that you cannot paint gutters, and it even has been passed down, from generations that no, you don't paint the gutters, because they'll peel. But again, if you've got a surface that you can get all the contaminants off of it, the adhesion products that are out there today, with the adhesion on the products that are out there today, there's not going to be a challenge, with that at all. So.
Gotcha.
Proper acrylics. So 2008, a lot of oil products were banned. EPA forced a lot of constraints on coatings manufacturing industries to lower VOCs, which eliminated a lot of the traditional stuff that would really stick, right? Like, think of like oil, sticks to everything, right? So a lot of that went away, and acrylics and elastomeric coatings in the water-based realm have come a long way. And if it doesn't stick, it's usually due to a failure on whoever's applying it. They didn't clean it well enough. Gutters are a common one because you have weather exposure on one side and two sides and all the way around. And guess what? They form shadows, and they get a lot of mildew growth. If you don't kill mildew, you're giving it perfect shelter. As soon as you paint it, it needs moisture and it needs shade. You're not suffocating it. You're giving it a perfect scenario to thrive. And then as it thrives underneath that fresh paint, that's what causes peeling there. So again, it's just doing things intentfully and with deliberate focus, and it's not rocket science. Just make sure it's clean. Use
the knowledge that you wanted. Maybe some you didn't even know that you wanted. Right here on the Ohio Painting Company podcast.
Too much
the founders have it, without a doubt. Kevin Silliman and Nick Goebel, founders of the Ohio Painting Company. That's another episode in the books, folks. And if you want to keep up with the Ohio Painting Company, you certainly can on plenty of social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as on YouTube. Be sure and like and subscribe, and you'll be up to date with the Ohio Painting Company with everything that happens from certain specific locations where paint is being applied, and right here on the Ohio Painting Company podcast, where we answer questions, we talk about the industry, and a little bit more about what happens behind the scenes. So, guys, thanks so much for having me up here in the big warehouse. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you around the corner.
All right, thanks.